right, well, good morning, everybody. I am excited to be here as we continue our Made for Monday series. How about you? Who's excited to be here this morning? That was medium. I'll take it. So I was sitting at work one morning last week, and I had just opened up my Gmail because I had a bunch of emailing to do, and I got a phone call, and I saw that it was Jenny, so I picked it up, and I said, hey, what's going on? And she said, hey, I was just wondering why there's 2 wet diapers on the banister at the top of the stairs. And I very honestly replied, I have no idea. I don't think I put them there. And she said, yeah, I know. I put them there. And I was confused, admittedly, but I took the bait, and I said, well, it sounds like you answered your question then. There's 2 wet diapers on the banister because you put them there. And she said, yeah. I put them there directly on top of your computer 45 minutes ago after I changed 2 toddlers who ran away naked because they didn't want to get dressed. And I set them there so that when you went to work, you could take them down the stairs and throw them away. And I really honestly replied to her again, I don't remember that at all. I have no doubt, 100% certain that that's exactly what I did, but I don't remember doing that at all. Like, I don't remember moving the diapers, and I just didn't think about it. But next time you want me to do something, can you just tell me? And she very graciously, because she's gracious with me, and because, like, after half our lives together, this is her normal, and she's used to it, she said, well, how about we just go with this? Next time something's on your computer, you just assume I put it there on purpose and try and guess what I wanted you to do with it. I said, I'll try. I'll give it a shot. And then because she's Jenny and she just does what she does, I'm sure that what she did was picked up the diapers, took them down the stairs outside and threw them away. And I can't guarantee that she didn't have like a moment of regret while walking down the stairs about the bad choice she made when she was 16. But it's too late now. And but she just did it. But I hung up and I had this really convicting moment because I realized okay, this is what my wife does every day, all day, and it's just who she is. I'm sure she picked up the diapers, she took them outside, she threw them away, and never thought about it again. But if the roles were reversed, right? If I had wanted her to throw away diapers, and then she didn't do it, and I had to do it, I was wondering how would my heart have been? Because I'm pretty sure she just did it and didn't think about it. And I realized my heart would have been grumpy. I've been grumpy because I hate diapers. I hate them. I sat down yesterday, I tried to do math, and I think I came up with an approximate number. I think I've changed 7 million diapers in my lifetime. Something like that. I'm just emotionally done with it. And if our twins don't get potty trained soon, I'm putting them on Craigslist. Free to a good home. Warning, biters, okay? But it was this powerful realization for me, especially in the middle of thinking about and teaching through this series, Made for Mondays, that there's a whole lot of stuff that makes up my weekly schedule, like little tasks and busy work and stuff that I need to do, but I don't like to do. That's just a part of my daily grind. There are so many of these ordinary, unexciting responsibilities that I don't do with a whole lot of joy, and that I find draining, and that I don't see God in or serve God through. And I'm guessing I'm not the only person in the room this morning who has that problem. We've been talking over the course of the last few weeks about how work can be worship, about how God didn't just design us for Sundays and for the church spaces, but that we're made for Mondays. And not last week. Last week we spread out all around the city to serve with Reach Des Moines, which is awesome. Thank you to everybody who served with that. But the few weeks before that, we talked about how we tend to see work as part of the curse, because work is frustrating, because work makes us grumpy and it stresses us out. We tend to see it as this necessary evil in a broken world. But if we reach way back to the beginning in Genesis 1, we find out that God created us in his image for work. And that when we work, we live out our creative purpose. We also talked about how work isn't something that exists in a box that's separate from our faith, but work is an opportunity to live out our faith. At work or school or whatever it is we do 40-plus hours a week, it's a chance to worship God by bringing him glory and adding value to the lives of the people around us. And what I want to do this morning is dig even deeper into this intersection between work and faith by talking about how we can find the extraordinary in our ordinary, how to recognize the presence of God and the holiness of the task in front of you in the midst of the mundane. Okay, and I'm really fired up about this. I'm really excited for this topic, not because I think that I have anything great to say, but because I'm convinced that God wants to change the way we see our toil. He wants to transform our drudgery into purpose, and he wants to take our ordinary and make it extraordinary. Let's be dead honest for a minute. There's a lot of ordinary going on. Most of us in this room feel completely ordinary. We look at who we are and what we do day in and day out, and we could not possibly feel more normal and boring and average and common and insignificant. And we're in good company, okay? If you feel like your life is ordinary and boring and insignificant, what I can guarantee you is that there are people who you wouldn't group in that same group with you, who you wouldn't identify as normal or ordinary, who feel that way too. I don't know if you guys heard this. Some of you may have, but others of you may not. The Cubs won the World Series. You knew that was coming today. Probably you're shocked it took that long. But the Cubs, they won the World Series, and it was awesome, and it was the best. But after the World Series, one of the guys, he's a catcher. He's retiring this year. His name's David Ross. And he's spent over 10 years in the big leagues and had a completely nondescript major league career. But he hit a home run, and after the game, he was being interviewed, and the interviewer said, "David, you hit a huge key home run, and afterwards you looked shocked that you hit it. What's up with that?" And Ross looked at the reporter and said, "You'd be shocked too if you had my swing." So even World Series heroes feel like they're completely ordinary and unimportant at their jobs. And so if you do too, you're in good company. But I think the problem isn't even so much that we feel ordinary, is that there are so many things that make up our ordinary lives, so many tasks and so much of our work that we just dread. So many things on our weekly schedules that we have just come to hate and see no purpose in whatsoever. I mean, if I asked you guys right now to raise your hand if there is something coming up for you in the next 5 days, something on your calendar right now that you know you have to do, but you are not looking forward to at all, how many hands would go up? All of them, if we're honest. Like, if I gave you long enough to think of it, every hand in this room would go up. All of us have stuff coming up in our work week, in the places we're going to be 40 plus hours over the next 5 days, that we are not looking forward to at all, that stresses us out, that drains us, and that sucks the life out of us. Like every 24 hours, we come face to face anew with the daily grind of life. And to make it through the frustration and the drudgery of it all, we come up with these little catchphrases that are supposed to be inspiring, like, "Well, just grin and bear it," right? And that's not the most inspired possible way that we could go through life. And I think for some of us, like, the truth is when we wake up tomorrow morning and we walk out the door, our backpack is going to feel so heavy that it's the weight of the world on our shoulders. Our necktie is going to feel like a noose, and our name badge is going to feel like a guilty verdict that we didn't do more with our lives. And we're going to spend a big chunk of the 40 plus hours that we dedicate to the things that we do during the course of the week, bored at best, frustrated and drained and stressed out at worst. And even for those of us who love what we do, and that's a chunk of us, and we just genuinely love what we get to do, those frustrating moments where we pull our hair out if we had any, like they're inevitable. Because work is hard and work is frustrating sometimes, and work isn't always everything that we hoped it would be, and there are tasks that we have to complete in this world that feel beneath us, that feel useless, that feel ordinary, and that feel mundane. And that's the reality of our world. I think that reality leaves us in a space where often we settle for less. We settle for less than what we were created for. We settle for less than what our work and our school could be. We settle for less than the kind of difference that we could make, the kind of difference we were created to make. We settle for less than the kind of value that we could add to the people around us in this world. We settle for less than feeling fully alive and fully actualized in our work and in the places that we are, because we allow the mundane to suck the life out of us. And then I think what happens is we buy into this idea that real life is measured only in big moments, the mountaintops that we're looking back to or forward to. And we begin to believe that God isn't like really fully present in the everyday stuff, that God isn't really fully real in the ordinary, that He isn't really there with us in the mundane bits of our lives. That a sense of meaning and a sense of purpose and a sense of God's presence, that a sense of joy and peace and contentment are not for the everyday. They're for the big moments, the births and the baptisms, the proposals and promotions, these cataclysmic events that take up a disproportionate amount of the memory on our phones and the space on our social media feeds. These rare moments where we say, man, that's when I felt fully alive, but there's a problem with that. And it's if we only feel fully alive in those rare moments, we're missing out on 99% of life that's spent in the grind. Like that's where most of life is spent. And as great as the big moments are, and they're great, and as much as they shape us and they do, they aren't the real stuff of life. They aren't the places where we spend most of our time. You know, the Cubs winning the World Series was awesome, but it took 108 years of suffering to get there. That's like 99.8%, right? And they had a victory parade on Friday. It was the 7th largest gathering in human history, which is stupid that we care about sports that much. But like, amazing. And they interviewed an 8-year-old kid. And he said, and they said, man, you're 8 years old. How are you feeling? He said, I'm just glad I didn't have to live for the other 100. Well, that's a smart kid. But I feel like that kid. I don't know about you, but I don't want to feel alive only once a century. Okay, I don't want to drag myself through the other 100 so that I can get to like one big moment where I feel like God's really here and I'm really inspired. I'm really living out my purpose. In this special fleeting moment, I want to feel fully alive in every single moment of every single day. I want to know the presence of God. I want to live out my creative purpose in the ordinary stuff of my life and the places where I spend most of my time. I'm convinced of this. If we begin to see God in the mundane and not just the Instagrammable, everything will change. Okay, when we wake up and the oxygen hits our lungs and our feet hit the floor, the truth is that in the joy and the pain and the toil and the grief and the busy work of life, we can find incredible beauty. And we can live the lives that we were created to live. And my hope is that all of us will walk out of here this morning convinced that we can find joy and we can feel truly alive in the midst of the commonplace. Right in the middle of spreadsheets and homework and diapers and meetings and cleaning, and even we can feel fully alive while shopping at Walmart. Okay, and I know that a lot of you don't believe that's true, but it is. In every single moment, we can feel fully alive when we open up our eyes to the presence of God. Okay, if you have your Bibles with you this morning, you can open up to Ecclesiastes chapter 3. It's kind of right in the middle of the book. Okay? And what we're going to take a look at is some wisdom literature written by the wisest guy who ever lived. His name is Solomon. And he's writing about how life sometimes is super frustrating. That we work and we work and we work and we toil and we toil and we toil and we grind and we grind and we grind, and it doesn't seem like a whole lot ever happens. And he's talking about how maybe, just maybe, God is in that space. I once heard a speaker say this: if God doesn't rule your mundane, then he doesn't rule you, because that's where you live. Like, I'm convinced that God wants to meet you in the mundane this week, and that if we were willing to open up our eyes and see him there, okay, and see him there, because he's already there. He's there and he's waiting for us there. It's just the brokenness of our world blinds us to that fact. We feel like God couldn't possibly be in those spaces that we hate and those spaces that drain us. But he's there, and if we open up our eyes and see him there, what we're going to find is a few things that are transformative to our lives. And the first one is this, if you're a note taker. Number one, we're going to find pleasure in our work. We're going to find pleasure in our work when we see God in the mundane. So Ecclesiastes 3, starting in verse 9, Solomon says this: what do workers gain from their toil? I've seen the burden God has laid on the human race. Super encouraging, right? If you're feeling depressed, don't read Ecclesiastes. Solomon is more concerned with accuracy than encouragement in this book, right? He's just like, dude, work stinks. And what he's saying, I think, is like, if you've ever felt like this guy, you're not alone. Like, everyone who ever worked has felt like this guy. Maybe. Well, there was going to be a meme of a guy who said, I like work only marginally more than I like homelessness. So, which is true. Like, some of us, like, we like the idea of working just a little bit better than we like the idea of being homeless. And so we drag ourselves out of bed in the morning and we get there. And that's okay, because everyone's been there. Work is hard. Work is difficult. Work stinks. Sometimes it's stressful. And I know this really isn't helping my big idea, so we're going to keep on reading what Solomon has to say, because he doesn't stop there. He says this: he has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. So he's made everything beautiful. That God can take anything and he can make it beautiful. And there are some of us who doubt that. Some of us who know the stuff that's coming up in our weeks, who know the things that frustrate us, and we doubt that God can actually inhabit that space and make something good out of it. But Solomon tells us that if we look through the right lens, we can see the creative beauty in everything, in every moment, and in every task. Because part of who God is and part of how God works in the world is to take those things and give them meaning and give them purpose and use them in incredible ways to add value to people and bless the world. We may feel during the week that we're crunching numbers, or we're washing dishes, or we're sitting in pointless meetings, or doing menial tasks that make no difference whatsoever. But Solomon is imploring us here to look up and look beyond. To realize that in the midst of tasks that we hate doing, in the midst of the things that most frustrate us, our myopia is blinding us to the fact that there's a God of eternity who's working out a bigger purpose than we can see. That we can step back for a moment and realize that God created the world through the lens of eternity, that he's doing something bigger than we know in every single moment. There's something more and something better than the frustration of the tasks that we're doing. And something inside of us knows that. Solomon says he put eternity in the human heart. That thing inside of us that says there's got to be something more and there's got to be something better than this is something that God built inside of us so that we could step back from our frustration in a broken world and see from an eternal perspective that he is at work to set all things right, make all things new, to bless the world and draw people to himself. And he invites us to be a part of that, and that's a mind-blowing perspective. And Solomon continues. He says, I know that there's nothing better for people than to be happy and do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their labor. This is the gift of God. Hey, I love this. And what he's not saying is like, eat, drink, and be merry. Who cares? YOLO. Okay, that's not what he's saying. He's saying like, it's not the big idea. What Solomon isn't saying is YOLO. He's saying like, work is a gift of God because it puts food on our table. Like work is this incredible multifaceted gift that God gives us. And it's, number one, it's a gift of purpose. God invites us to be his co-creators. We've said it a few times in this series, but in Genesis 1, when God created the world, he looked at it and he said, it's good, not it's perfect. He sat back at the end of it all and said, this is very good, not check mark, it's done. And what that means is that from the very beginning, from the first to the last, God created us and invited us to be his co-creators, to literally rewrite the future that's ahead of us for ourselves and for the people around us. That's what God created us to do, and it's the purpose that God invites us into. And what I think we need to see, and what I hope we can see, is that when we participate in that, even in ways that feel insignificant, even in tasks that don't feel like they're making a huge difference, what we're doing is participating in creating a better world. Anything that adds any value to anybody creates a better future, and that means it matters. Anything that creates any value for anybody creates a better future. That means it matters. It matters. In Solomon's words, there's nothing better than that, than to do good with our lives. And number two, work's a gift because it provides for us. We chuckle at the idea of liking work just barely more than we like homelessness, right? Because it's true sometimes, and that's why we get up and go to work. But the reality is work provides for us. Work is the way that God puts food on our table and puts shelter over our heads and provides for our families. And work is also a way that God provides for the people around us. Like every single one of us, we work at whatever God's put in front of us in ways that provide for us. And in this crazy scheme, God created a world where we're more blessed by the work of others than we could possibly imagine. Like think of all the things you do in a week, that you drive a car, that you put on clothing, that you eat food. Like what if you had to make your own car and make your own clothes and make your own food and grow it? Like we're so incredibly blessed in ways that we see and in ways that we're not even conscious of every day by the work of everybody else around us. And what that means is that what you're doing, even if it feels small to you, even if it feels ordinary to you because it's what you do every day, is blessing people around you as a part of God's created purpose in the world more than you possibly know and more than sometimes you imagine. Work is a blessing for us. That's the way God created the world. And God's inviting us to step back sometimes from our frustration with the ordinary, our frustration with the mundane, and just see his hand at work behind the day-to-day take-for-granted world. When we allow God to meet us in the mundane, we find pleasure in our work. The second thing we find when we allow God to meet us in the mundane is we find purpose for each task. And this one I think is harder to see. Okay, for those of us who really don't love our jobs, like whose first emotion when upon hearing our alarm clock tomorrow is this. Okay, statistically, that's a lot of us, okay? Well, if you feel like Bill Murray in Groundhog Day, and when your alarm clock goes off, you just want to punch it tomorrow, okay, don't raise your hand if that's you. I know It's a lot of us, but mostly I just don't want to see Jenny's hand raised because I like to convince myself she gets fired up about the daily routine of washing urine-soaked sheets. I like to drink water before bed. No. Some of us are in that spot. We don't want to wake up tomorrow morning. We're really ticked off, and we hate work or school. But even for those of us who hate our jobs, it's easy a little bit to do that first part and step back and say, okay, maybe God's doing something bigger here. Okay, maybe there's a purpose here that I don't see, right? But for all of us, whether we hate our jobs or even love our jobs, what's really hard is to zoom in and find purpose in every single task. To find meaning in every little bit of everything it takes to do whatever it is God's placed in front of us in this season. But what I want us to do is begin to see every bit of our work, even the bits we loathe and we most want to avoid, as holy. Because that's how God sees them. That's the kind of workers he created us in his image to be, and that's the kind of work he created us in his image to do. In Colossians 3:23, Paul writes, "Whatever you do, do it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters." Martin Luther King Jr. was speaking about this idea once, and he argued that our greatest problem with living out this verse, our greatest problem with giving everything we've got to every little task in front of us, isn't so much the tasks themselves, it's our pride. We struggle to find pleasure in doing the little things, and we struggle to do the little things to the glory of God because we so easily come to this place where we believe those little things are beneath us. And then we tend to blame our frustration on the tasks themselves, like, my boss gave me this stupid project to work on. My teacher gave me this stupid homework assignment. I had to clean this stupid floor again. But the problem isn't the insignificance of our tasks. The problem is the overinflated sense of significance we have with regard to ourselves. We just get convinced that we're too important to condescend to do the little things and the small things. But I wonder if Jesus, who created the universe, didn't think it was beneath him to come and to touch the broken and to wash the feet of sinners and to take on the task of a thief and die on a cross so that we could be forgiven and set free. I wonder if there's any task that's too small for us. I love this vision of the church, of this church, just being a community that will go to the places where no one else will go and do the things that no one else will do, because we've become convinced that there is nothing to be done in this world that's bigger than our courage or beneath our dignity. King went on to argue that if we could see ourselves rightly, if we could see, more importantly, God rightly, we'd be able to find pleasure and meaning and the presence of God in every little task, no matter how small or insignificant it felt. He said this, I love it. Even if it falls your lot to be a street sweeper, go on out and sweep streets like Michelangelo painted pictures. Sweep streets like Handel and Beethoven composed music. Sweep streets like Shakespeare wrote poetry. Sweep streets so well that all the hosts of heaven and earth will have to pause and say, here lived a great street sweeper who swept his job well. When we allow God to meet us in the mundane, we find purpose for every task. And the third thing we find is we find the presence of God in every moment. There's a Bible scholar from Yale named Walter Brueggemann who argued that for most Christians in America, the gospel is a truth that we accept, but at the same time, it's something he called a truth greatly reduced. He said that for most Christians, we accept this idea that Jesus came and he died on the cross for us as some sort of eternal salvific reality, that one day, because this happened, we're going to be saved. But we greatly reduce the truth of it because we don't allow it to impact and radically reshape every second of our lives. And Brueggemann argued that if we truly magnify the gospel, if we truly understand what it means that the God of the universe not only saved us from sin and death, but to the lives that he created us for, then it absolutely has to add vibrancy and life and brilliance and beauty to every little thing that we do. Because we begin to see the earth-shattering presence of God in every moment. In Acts 17, Paul talks about the presence of God and says, God is not far from any one of us. Then he quotes the Cretan philosopher Epimenides. He says, in him we live and move and have our being. In him we live and move and have our being. Like we can just open our eyes in the midst of our drudgery. I'm convinced that what we'll find is that God is just as present in the valleys and on the plains and in the steppes as he is on the mountaintop experiences of our lives. I think that's a countercultural idea. I do. That God is present in the little things, that God is real in the things that we hate, and that the small tasks are holy. Like there's a sense in our world today that they're not, that you have to travel, you have to go somewhere to some mountaintop, sometimes a literal mountaintop, to see God and to experience His presence and to find adventure and to live an epic life. That we need these mountaintop experiences in order to feel fully alive, to gain life experience, to be courageous, to be cultured, to really understand. I think there's even a sense in the church that if you really want to know God and you really want to sense His presence, then you got to go to some far off land on some mission trip in order to really connect with Him. And don't get me wrong, I'm not against traveling, and I'm definitely not against mission trips. Like every place I've been on this planet has convinced me of the greatness of the Creator, like in its unique beauty. And I think traveling is great. And I think too, mission trips are amazing. I'm passionate about missions. That's part of the reason Jeff is here. Okay, but I think what we've allowed to happen in our lives is this cult of travel has come up. Because we're so dissatisfied in the moments, and we're so frustrated with the mundane that we've become a people who believe that the mundane isn't good enough, that God has to be found somewhere else in doing something else. And strangely enough, like the godfather of this cult of travel is J.R.R. Tolkien. And his book, The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, are kind of the sacred texts of this idea that we need to go and find ourselves and develop our courage and our sense of wonder on epic adventures. Right? The mantra of our moment is Tolkien's, "Not all who wander are lost." And so we go and we seek purpose and we try to find ourselves on great adventures in faraway places where we hope maybe we can actually experience God and experience life. But there's a deep irony in that. That's why I say it's strange that Tolkien is the spiritual father of this idea. The only time Tolkien ever really left England is when he got sent to France to fight in World War I. Spent almost his whole life in London. When he went on vacation, he went as far as the English seacoast. He ate at the same pub every single Tuesday with C.S. Lewis and a bunch of his other friends. And for fun, he graded other professors' papers. Okay, and it wasn't that Tolkien was afraid to travel, and it wasn't that Tolkien didn't have the means to travel. It was that Tolkien never thought he needed to, and neither did Lewis. See, when Tolkien was asked about The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings and how they inspired this sense of adventure in people, he laughed and he said, "Oh no, that's not the purpose." He said he wrote those and he saw the English people as the hobbits, this common people with great courage but no imagination. And he knew they had great courage because he'd seen his countrymen charge off to fight for what was right. He'd seen them fearlessly pour out of the trenches alongside him in the Great War. But what he felt like was that all of them lacked the imagination to have wonder in their lives. He looked around him and he saw an English people that farmed their farms and opened their shops and baked their bread without any sense of the greatness and the beauty of it all. And so he wrote, and C.S. Lewis wrote, what they called fairy stories, not to inspire their countrymen to travel and to seek greatness somewhere else, but to inspire their countrymen to dream and to see the incredible beauty and find the meaning and the deep presence and purpose of their Creator right where they were. Okay, for Tolkien and Lewis, immersion in these fantasy worlds wasn't an escape from reality. It was the opportunity to connect to the reality that's more real. To see the way in which even the most ordinary life on this planet is filled with epic quests, with wrenching conflicts, with a heroic choice between greed and selfishness, compassion and courage every single day. That's why Tolkien wrote Lord of the Rings. That's why Lewis wrote Chronicles of Narnia. That's why Paul said, God is not far from us. In him we live and we move and we have our being, to inspire us and to give us vision, to give us eyes to see the presence of God and the wonder and the epic story that we're living every single moment of our lives. To awaken us to the presence of a Creator in the universe in every single moment and remind us that every second our heart is beating. We're living an epic adventure. We have a chance to rewrite the future in every moment for ourselves and for the people around us by pointing people towards God and adding value to their lives. If you've come to believe that your life is too ordinary to care about, too common to invest in, know that your Creator doesn't believe that. I believe if you can just stop buying into the idea that you need to be someone else in some place else doing something else in order to live a life of meaning and a life of adventure, in order to live an epic story. If you can let God meet you in the mundane this week, if you can decide to seek Him in the frustrating and in the common and in the tiresome, you will find something extraordinary in your ordinary. You'll find pleasure in your work. You'll find purpose in each task. And you'll find the presence of God in every single moment. And you'll change the world. Maybe not in ways that are remembered. Maybe not in ways that they write books about, but one tiny task done well, one life touched, one bit of value added at a time, you'll change the world. So we've got to understand most of what Jesus is doing to draw the world to Himself, to set things right, and to bless people, He's doing through ordinary people doing ordinary things with extraordinary love and purpose. My prayer for Revision is that we would be an army of ordinary people who see and who serve an extraordinary God in everything that we do. You know what? It's not going to be easy. It's not. This is really hard because there are things in our weeks that we hate. And you're not going to wake up tomorrow and stop hating them. There are things that are coming on your schedule in the next 5 days that you don't want to do, and you're not going to wake up tomorrow and feel like, you know what, I want to do that now. That's just not how it works. Okay, there are things about work and life that are draining and frustrating, and we live in a world that tells us we should quit, or we should do them half-heartedly, or we should complain about them. And for most of us, we're not used to seeing, to seeing God in them. So I just want to close this morning by giving you permission to fail. Because this is a journey. Okay? And I'm not shy about trying to afflict us in the places I think we're comfortable. But in this area, I want us to see this idea and this message as an invitation and not a conviction. Because I think in this area of being frustrated with the mundane and trying to see God in every moment, the worst thing that we could possibly do is to layer guilt on top of frustration. To layer the feeling that we're somehow failing God on top of the drudgery of it all already. Okay, like if tomorrow morning you wake up and the first email that you get that says, please come to my office, or the first thing that you have to clean, or the first pop quiz that your teacher announces, or the first file that gets dropped on your desk doesn't inspire you to say, thank you, God, this is epic, okay? Then you're normal, and that's okay. And it isn't that I think we don't need to get there. Because I think we do. I think it's revolutionary for us if we can start seeing the purpose and the beauty of God in every little thing that we do. It'll change everything about us, and it'll change everything about the lives of the people around us as we add value to them. We need to get there, but it's a journey. It's going to be filled with potholes. And those potholes, my prayer is that they won't cause us to turn back, but they'll cause us to press forward and take one step closer to seeing the creative purpose that our Creator made us with. That we'll keep opening our eyes to the holy tasks that are right in front of us every moment. That will allow God to meet us in the mundane because He's there. And He's holy. And those spaces are holy, and they're what we're created for. My favorite poem is one by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. She writes this: earth's crammed with heaven, and every common bush afire with God. But only he who sees takes off his shoes. The rest sit round it and pluck blackberries. Let's pray. Father, life is frustrating sometimes. Work and family and school and everything that we do can be frustrating. We pray that you give us eyes to see. Just give us a bigger vision of your presence and your grace and your love in the midst of the frustration, of the places and spaces and the things that drain us. God, could you just take our ordinary and help us to see the extraordinary in it? Help us to see the epic adventure of this beautiful world and this beautiful life in every moment as we work in ways that live out our creative purpose and add value to the people around us and point them towards you. We thank you for giving us that purpose. We thank you for inviting us into it. God, open our eyes this week to see that earth is crammed with heaven. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.